The barber gave a free haircut to a poor man. But when a wealthy man in an expensive suit came to his salon a week later, he couldn't believe his eyes. For as long as he could remember, Benito dreamed of becoming an actor. His desire first arose when his father took him to the cinema. Benito was just 5 years old then, and his father wanted to introduce him to the magical world of movies. The boy had never been to a cinema before and eagerly anticipated this event. Father and son walked along narrow streets for a long time, and Benito held his father's hand tightly, sensing that his life was about to change and something special was going to happen in it. The cinema was located in an old building with tall arched windows and bright posters on the walls. Benito was captivated by the place from the first sight. Father and son bought tickets at the box office and entered the hall. The boy's eyes lit up with joy when he saw the huge room with soft red seats. The dim lighting created an atmosphere of real magic. Benito felt like anything could happen here. Any fairy tale in this enchanted place could come true. The seats that Benito and his father got were right in the middle of the hall. "We're lucky," said the father. "From here, we'll have a good view of everything happening on the screen." After seating the boy in his chair, the father went to the lobby and bought them a large paper cup of popcorn and 2 bottles of cool lemonade. "But Mom doesn't let me drink cold drinks," Benito reminded his father. The father put a finger to his lips and said quietly, "Shoo. Mom isn't here, and she won't find out anything. It'll be our secret, okay?" Benito nodded. He felt like he and his father were real conspirators. "Don't forget, little one, in the movies, anything is possible," added the father, and Benito remembered his words forever. Sitting in the chair, his feet barely reaching the floor, he eagerly awaited the start of the screening. Benito was sure that a real miracle was about to happen to him. Then, unexpectedly, the lights in the hall went out, and for a moment the boy was scared. But his father took his hand and pointed to the screen. Pictures and words began to appear, accompanied by music. The boy couldn't understand where all this was coming from. Just a moment ago, there was nothing there. Then Benito saw the first frames of the movie and held his breath. The screen started to unfold the story of 2 brave hero friends and their thrilling adventures. The movie immediately captured the boy's imagination, and he watched the actors without blinking, wide-eyed, forgetting about everything else in the world. Benito laughed along with the characters, worried for them during dangerous moments, and rejoiced in their victories. From time to time, the father glanced at his son and smiled, seeing his genuine joy and admiration. He was pleased that his idea with the movie brought Benito so much unfeigned pleasure. After the movie ended, father and son walked out of the cinema onto the street, where dusk was beginning to settle. Benito couldn't stop talking about what he had seen on the screen. Overflowing with impressions, he shared his favorite moments with his father. It seemed like Benito would never tire of telling everyone about the movie he had seen that day. The boy remembered his first trip to the cinema for the rest of his life. Watching a movie on the big screen turned out to be something special and magical for him. It was then that he first thought about how amazing it must be to be an actor. Benito recalled the 2 hero boys from the movie and dreamed of being in their place. "Then I could experience the same adventures as they did," he exclaimed to his mom and dad with admiration. They smiled in response. They didn't want to shatter their son's illusion prematurely, who believed that everything that happened on the screen had really happened. "And everyone will watch as I fight monsters and save the princess. And they'll be proud of me." Benito continued to dream. His eyes sparkled with excitement. He and his friends played nights for a long time afterward, fighting invisible monsters and shouting loudly when they imagined defeating them. Then Benito attended his first theater festival, organized in their small town. It was an unheard of and special event for such a small settlement. Remembering how much Benito enjoyed the cinema, his father decided to take him to the festival as well. From early morning, Benito couldn't sit still, knowing that he and his father would go to the performance in the evening. "Will it be like the movies?" Benito kept asking tirelessly. "No, a little different," his father patiently replied. But I'm sure you'll like the theater too. Dad, I can't wait to see everything with my own eyes, Benito said in a grown-up manner, and his parents couldn't help but laugh. As father and son walked to the square where the festival was to take place, the boy's heart beat desperately in his chest. He was in a hurry, afraid of missing something. Seeing this, his father whispered softly, "Patience, Benito. We're almost there." Finally, they reached the square, at the center of which stood a large stage, and the boy's eyes immediately lit up with delight. He saw theatrical decorations for the first time, adorning the dark curtain. "What's behind that curtain?" Benito impatiently asked his father. "That's called a curtain. It will rise when the performance begins." "Soon, I hope," replied the boy, hopping from one foot to the other. His father found an empty bench, and they sat down together. "Will I be able to see everything for sure?" the boy worried. "If not, I'll put you on my shoulders," his dad replied with a laugh, finally calming Benito down. Soon the curtain rose. Music played as elegantly dressed actors stepped onto the stage. The performance began. Benito watched the stage spellbound, hardly believing such a thing was possible. He liked the theater no less than the cinema. Benito carefully followed every movement of the actors, trying to memorize their lines and expressions. "Is all of this really happening in real life?" the boy thought. "It's like a dream. Everything is so beautiful and vivid." He forgot about everything else in the world and only snapped out of it when the play ended. "Did you like it?" his dad asked, and the boy nodded in response. For some reason, he didn't want to speak, as if he feared breaking the magic. Father and son returned home in complete silence. Benito was still overwhelmed by the performance. Now he couldn't say for sure which he liked more, movies or theater, but he knew that both would always attract him. When father and son arrived home, Benito announced that he wanted to become an actor. Hearing his words, his parents just smiled. They weren't rich and believed that only those with money and connections could become actors. However, they didn't say anything to discourage Benito, and the boy continued to live in his world of fantasies. As he grew older, Benito seized every opportunity to go to the movies or watch a new film at home. In his spare time, Benito studied biographies of actors and collected posters of them. At home, he told his parents about the new films he had seen and shared his impressions. Anything related to movies and theater inspired and delighted Benito. It was a whole world for him, capable of transporting a person anywhere, a universe full of wonders and adventures. The boy firmly believed that one day he would be a part of this magical space. However, his dreams were not destined to come true. When the time came to choose a profession, Benito decided firmly that he would go to the capital and try to enter the theater academy. The young man prepared diligently for the entrance exams. He took acting lessons, learned monologues from classic plays, and rehearsed scenes in front of the mirror. His parents, though they didn't believe he would succeed, still supported their son in his aspirations. The day of the entrance exams arrived. Benito was very nervous but kept his composure. The academy buzzed with activity, applicants rehearsed their performances everywhere, and teachers bustled around, preparing the auditoriums for auditions. When it was Benito's turn, he gathered all his courage and began to recite the monologue he had prepared aloud. He hoped to make a good impression on the stern judges, but he could feel that his voice sounded weak and unconvincing. Because of this, with every word, Benito's uncertainty grew. "Who am I to be an actor? I'm just an ordinary guy from a poor family," unexpectedly crossed his mind. Was this his thought, or did his parents think that way? Benito didn't know, but his self-confidence was fading with each passing second. Suddenly, he forgot the words he knew by heart, stumbled over a phrase, and awkwardly fell silent. The commission looked at him with sympathy and regret. One of the teachers even tried to prompt him with words, but Benito couldn't understand anything. His pounding heart drowned out all voices, and his mind refused to function. Benito felt he was about to faint from the tension, so he apologized and quickly left the auditorium. The young man rushed out of the theater academy building, feeling hot tears running down his cheeks. How could he have failed so miserably? Why hadn't he believed in himself? It turned out he had always doubted his abilities, but until now, that worm had peacefully slept in his head. Only when the realization of his dream was so close did it emerge and undermine him. Benito couldn't forgive himself for this weakness. "I'm good for nothing. All my efforts were in vain," he exclaimed in despair. Passers-by looked at him with surprise, but no one stopped. Everyone was busy with their own affairs. Benito felt hurt and sad. He decided he had had enough and headed to the train station. After buying a ticket back, he went to the dormitory for applicants to collect his things and left for home 2 hours later. For the first time in his life, Benito encountered complete uncertainty on the train. Life had seemed simple and understandable to him before. He had always known he would become an actor and perform in the theater and movies. But now his dreams lay shattered into 1,000 billion pieces, and Benito had no idea what to do next. He spent the whole evening pondering his future, and by the time the train stopped at his station, he had made a decision. The next day, the young man called his cousin and asked for help. His cousin worked as the head stylist at a barber shop and promised to teach Benito everything he knew. A few months later, Benito had learned how to cut hair, shave, and style beards. His cousin took Benito on as an intern at his salon, and the young man made progress. With each passing day, he grew more confident, and he started to attract regular clients. Life fell back into a familiar routine, and it seemed like Benito had completely forgotten his childhood dream of becoming an actor. However, it hadn't disappeared anywhere. Yes, Benito had given up, but deep down he still understood that the path to success couldn't always be straightforward and smooth. Yet the memory of his failure held him back. Benito felt he would never dare to face the admissions committee again and recite any monologue aloud. He stopped going to the movies and traveling to the neighboring city to visit the theater. However, his dream persistently reminded Benito of its presence. He constantly saw advertisements for theater clubs or posters announcing amateur productions in the city park. Benito caught himself thinking that he terribly wanted to join them, but he held back. He felt ashamed that he had failed the exams, and he didn't want anyone to know about it. Moreover, he dreamed of becoming a serious actor, not a mediocre one, so the thought of participating in amateur performances embarrassed him. In general, Benito stopped improving his craft, pretending not to care. But the deep wound in his soul did not heal, and the young man often felt a huge emptiness inside, which he carefully concealed in his daily routine. Benito's typical workday began early in the morning. Upon waking up, he headed to the kitchen to make himself a strong coffee. The aromatic drink invigorated him and put him in a working mood. After breakfast, Benito went to the salon located in the city center. He loved this place. The interior was done in pleasant beige and light brown tones, comfortable leather chairs, mirrors and wooden frames. True, the photographs of famous actors on the walls always reminded Benito of his own failure in that field, but on the other hand, they somehow calmed him and gave him invisible hope. First thing in the salon, Benito checked the schedule for the day and prepared his tools, scissors, razors, combs. The routine made him forget about everything else. Immersing himself in it, he felt that regrets about the past were letting him go. Benito meticulously maintained the cleanliness of his workspace to ensure his clients felt comfortable and enjoyed their haircuts. Benito enjoyed interacting with visitors. He knew how to find common ground with each of them. Whenever he was in the salon, there was always a friendly atmosphere. During work, Benito always joked and told funny stories, creating a relaxed environment. He didn't want to just mechanically cut and shave. Among other things, he tried to create a good mood. And clients repaid Benito in kind. The young man always left work in high spirits. True, closing the salon door, Benito invariably glanced at the portraits of actors and sighed. But a moment later, he remembered the faces of his clients and their satisfied smiles and smiled himself. He nodded to the actors, mentally saying goodbye to them, and went home, carrying memories of another pleasant day with him. "You've lived it in vain," a quiet voice whispered in his head. You haven't gotten any closer to your dream. But Benito immediately silenced it within himself. He tried to live as if he had never had any dream. And yet the voice in his head was wrong. Benito's days were not passing in vain. From interacting with people, Benito learned a lot. Together with clients, he experienced many interesting stories and even whole life stories. Visitors willingly told the friendly and open young man about themselves, and some even became good friends. Sometimes they dropped by just to chat. So Benito expanded his emotional repertoire and human reactions to various situations. Deep down, he understood that this was very useful for an actor. During lunch breaks, Benito usually stepped outside to enjoy the fresh air and have a snack at a local cafe. Through the cafe window, he observed the city life, people rushing about their business, children playing in the square, couples walking hand in hand. In these moments, he also learned a lot. Benito's life flowed quietly and steadily when suddenly one day something happened. That morning, as usual, he arrived at the salon and began preparing for the workday. He carefully checked his tools, ensured the cleanliness of his workspace, and reviewed the client appointments. The day promised to be busy. However, his first client called Benito at the last moment and canceled the haircut. "Sorry, Benito. They asked me to come to work earlier," he lamented. "Can I come by tomorrow?" Benito rescheduled the client for the next day and stepped outside to get some fresh air. The sun was pleasantly warm. Benito tilted his face to the morning rays and closed his eyes. Suddenly, a sound caught his attention. Benito opened his eyes and saw a man sitting on the steps of the neighboring building. The stranger looked tired and worn out, dressed in old, tattered clothes. His shoes seemed on the verge of falling apart. Disheveled gray hair and an unkempt beard gave the man a very untidy appearance. He didn't look at Benito. Apparently, the stranger was lost in his own melancholic thoughts. Benito called out to the man, who startled and looked at him with bright blue and very sad eyes. Benito asked the stranger how he ended up here and if he needed any help. I was just walking and thinking about how to go on," the man confessed quietly. "Did something happen to you?" Benito asked sympathetically. "I recently lost my job," the stranger sighed. "And that job was my whole life." Benito's heart ached with pity. The man's words reminded him of his own loss. His dream, which had been his entire life, had crumbled to ashes. Benito composed himself and pondered. What could he do to help this stranger? Benito knew he couldn't solve his problems. But what could he do for him right now? Benito glanced again at the man's hair and beard, and an idea came to him. "Perhaps you'd like to come to my salon and get a haircut. I don't have any clients right now. It will be free for you." The man looked at Benito in astonishment, hardly believing his ears. But does such a thing happen nowadays? He wondered aloud. Benito nodded with a smile. "Why not?" he replied. The man gratefully accepted Benito's offer and entered the salon. Benito seated the stranger in the chair and began his work. He carefully trimmed the man's hair, tidied up his tangled beard, and gave his face a groomed appearance. They didn't speak much during the haircut. The stranger still seemed unable to believe what was happening. When Benito finished, the man looked at himself in the mirror and hardly recognized his own reflection. He appeared completely transformed, neat and confident. Even his worn-out clothes and shoes didn't seem so old anymore. A smile appeared on the man's face, and his eyes lit up. With heartfelt gratitude, the stranger thanked Benito and left. Soon, the next client arrived, and Benito soon forgot about the poor man. A week passed. Benito was back at work. The day was sunny and bright, and clients came in one after another in high spirits, which made Benito happy. He had just finished cutting the hair of the last scheduled visitor when suddenly the door opened again. Benito looked up and was speechless. A finely dressed man entered the salon. His expensive suit and confident posture immediately caught everyone's attention. He had dark hair and a neat beard. And his face. Everyone knew that face. Standing before Benito was Andres Cesada, the famous actor of theater and film. Benito couldn't believe his eyes. Maybe he was mistaken, and this man just resembled the famous personality? Just to be sure, Benito rubbed his eyes. The wealthy gentleman with a polite smile looked at him. "Can I help you with something?" Benito asked. "Would you like a haircut?" The man shook his head. "I didn't come here for a haircut," he confessed. Intrigued, Benito offered the man to sit on the couch where clients usually waited for their turn, and he sat down beside him. "First of all, I would like to introduce myself," the man said. "Perhaps you've already guessed that my name is Andres Cesada." Benito nodded reverently. So, he wasn't mistaken. But how was it possible that such a famous actor had entered their tiny salon? Benito didn't have answers to these questions yet, and he prepared himself to listen attentively to Senor Cesada. "The thing is, a week ago, one of the barbers in this salon did a very good deed," Andres explained. Benito looked at the actor in surprise. "But what exactly?" he asked, puzzled. "This barber gave a free haircut to a poor man," the man replied. Benito suddenly remembered the blue-eyed stranger in old clothes and nodded. "That was me," he admitted. "I felt really sorry for that man. I had some free time, and I decided to help him in any way I could." Andres Cesada smiled. "You did a very noble thing," he said. "I came here to personally thank you." Benito smiled back. "It's nothing to me," he shrugged. But Andres Cesada seemed to think otherwise. "You're wrong. Kind deeds should never be taken lightly," he reasoned. Benito agreed with Senor Cesada but didn't want to feel like a hero. He believed anyone in his place would have done the same. Benito suddenly wondered who the poor man was to Andres Cesada. Could he have been his father? But Benito couldn't believe it. How could the father of such a famous and wealthy man wander the streets in tattered clothing? Benito really wanted to ask Andres about it, but he hesitated. However, his curiosity was soon satisfied. "The thing is, that poor man was my first teacher," Andres Cesada finally spoke. "Really?" Benito exclaimed in disbelief. So that's what it was. Now many things became clear to him. Yes, his name is Gaspar Sanchez, and he spent his whole life at the theater studio, Andres Cesada said. Benito caught his breath. "No way," he exclaimed. So unwittingly, he had cut the hair of his acting teacher. Waiting for the theatrical pause, Andres Cesada began his story. "Not everyone knows that I was born and raised in this town. When I was little, I dreamed of becoming an actor. I loved the theater where my mother took me, and every night before bed, I imagined myself on stage." Just like me, Benito thought, unable to look away from the man. He was impressed by his words. So, he and Andres Cesada were from the same hometown. "But I had one problem," the man continued. "Whenever I performed in front of an audience, I started to stutter. I didn't know where this defect came from, but I couldn't do anything about it. Every time I needed to say something on stage, I started to stutter horribly and turned bright red. With such a flaw, an acting career seemed impossible." Benito nodded. "But I was very lucky with my parents," Andres Cesada continued. "My mother always believed I was the best in the world and supported me in everything. 'My son can do anything,' she always said. My mother didn't see any obstacles on the way to my goal. When I complained to her that I stuttered in front of the public, she thought about it and asked me to wait a bit. 'I'll ask my friends and acquaintances, maybe they can suggest something,' his mother said. I went to school, and in the evening, when my mom returned from work, she came into my room and said she had found a solution. 'I've chosen a good acting teacher for you. He was recommended by my friend. She said he can work wonders,' explained Mom. The very next day, we went to my first lesson. When I saw Gaspar Sanchez, I immediately felt trust towards him. I sensed that this person knows a lot and has tremendous experience. I felt that Senor Gaspar could help me. And that turned out to be true." Saying this, Andres Cesada cleared his throat. Benito stirred and offered him a glass of water. The man nodded gratefully. Taking a big sip, the famous actor continued his story. On my very first lesson, Senor Gasper told me that stuttering is a serious obstacle that prevents me from unleashing my talent and feeling confident on stage. But don't despair, the teacher added. We will overcome this defect together. Senor Gasper first attempted to understand the root of the problem. He explained to me that stuttering is linked to a fear of public speaking. Then, we began practicing various relaxation techniques and breathing exercises to alleviate tension before performances. Senor Gasper emphasized the importance of visualizing success and mentally preparing for it. We also employed the baby steps method. Instead of immediately presenting in front of a large audience, I performed monologues several times in front of my parents, then close relatives, and later gave a presentation to my classmates. Gradually, the number of people I spoke in front of increased, and along with it, my self-confidence grew. Andres Cesada took another sip of water. Benito watched him with admiration. It seemed his path to his dream was as thorny and difficult as Benito's own. But unlike Benito, the actor didn't give up. Suddenly, Benito felt ashamed that he had quickly abandoned his own cherished dream. Meanwhile, Andres took a deep breath and continued his narrative. During the lessons, Senor Gasper also incorporated elements of improvisation. This helped me learn to handle unexpected situations on stage and not be afraid to make mistakes. Improvisation allowed me to relax and enjoy the process of acting. Over time, I began to notice positive changes. My stuttering became less noticeable, and my confidence in my abilities grew. I became more comfortable expressing emotions and better controlled myself and my breathing. Benito listened to Andres with increasing excitement. If he could do it, then I can too, he thought inspiringly. Finally, the moment arrived when Senor Gasper offered me the opportunity to perform in the lead role in a play at his theater studio. Initially, I was so scared that I wanted to refuse right away. But the teacher convinced me to give it a try. If it doesn't work out, it's not a big deal, he said. It's just a play. His nonchalant attitude gave me confidence and even a sense of playfulness. I realized I was ready to give it a shot and agreed. Senor Gasper approvingly looked at me and wrote my name on the list of roles. Preparing for the play became a big challenge for me. Despite everything, I was very nervous and often mixed up words and phrases during rehearsals. The stuttering also occasionally made itself known. Senor Gasper and the other kids always treated this with understanding, and their good attitude gave me strength. Finally, the premiere day arrived. I felt an unprecedented responsibility and tension, but with the breathing practices I had learned in Senor Gasper's classes, I managed to relax and enter a playful and serene state. It was in this frame of mind that I stepped onto the stage. And miracle of miracles, I managed to play my role without a single stumble. The audience erupted in applause, and I felt incredible joy, relief, and gratitude to my teacher. I did it for real. I rejoiced. My mom was sitting in the front row, clapping as hard as she could. Mentally, I thanked her for supporting me all this time and never doubting my success. After the play, Senor Gasper approached me and sincerely praised me. You did great, dear. Remember, the most important thing is to believe in yourself, not be afraid to try new things, and always move forward. I remembered these words for life. They always inspired me to aim higher. Benito watched Andres with tears in his eyes. Now that he knew all about his challenging path to success, he appreciated his talent and hard work in a completely different light. You're amazing, the young man uttered, sighing stealthily. Unaware of his sadness, Andres Cesada continued. Later on, I participated in other productions. Then I entered the theater academy, which I graduated from with honors. After that, I was invited to play a supporting role in one of the city theaters. That's how my career began. I had very little time then, so I rarely called my teacher. Now I deeply regret that. Benito sensed the sadness in the man's voice. But what happened to Senor Gasper? Andres Cesada stood up from the couch and walked nervously around the room. Senor Gasper had many students, and he taught them everything he knew himself. He put his heart into his lessons, always trying to find an individual approach to each student. Senor Gasper always sought to unlock his students' potential and help them succeed. However, not everyone was grateful and appreciative of him for that. As Andres uttered the last sentence, irritation crept into his voice. Benito patiently awaited the continuation of the story. Once, a 17-year-old girl named Laura came to Senor Gasper for lessons, Andres continued. She was the daughter of a prominent businessman in town. Her parents dreamed of Laura becoming a famous actress. Since childhood, she was accustomed to getting everything she wanted and didn't know the meaning of refusal. When Laura came for her first lesson with the teacher, she immediately made it clear that she considered herself above others. Senor Gasper realized he had a challenging task ahead of him. He decided to start from the basics and gradually introduce Laura to the world of acting. However, every lesson turned into a trial. Laura constantly complained about the difficulty of tasks, refused to perform exercises, and was dismissive of the teacher's advice. She believed she was naturally talented. "My dad told me so," she arrogantly said. Despite the girl's haughty attitude, Senor Gasper was not about to give up. He had no intention of proving that she couldn't do something. On the contrary, he tried to turn her pride into an advantage. Senor Gasper devised quite challenging tasks for Laura. They worked together on scenes from classical plays, practiced improvisation, and studied speech technique. But Laura continued to treat the lessons condescendingly, not listening attentively to the teacher, neglecting homework, and showing little respect for the learning process. Senor Gasper couldn't do anything about it. Time passed quickly, and Laura went to the capital to apply to the theater academy. Senor Gasper knew that Laura was not adequately prepared for the entrance exams due to her attitude towards lessons, but he hoped for the best. He called the girl before the exams to encourage her. But Laura spoke to him very coldly. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage in front of the admissions committee. Laura looked more than stunning. Her blonde hair was loose, and she wore a beautiful white dress paired with new high-heeled shoes. Many teachers had already envisioned her in a leading role in some film. However, Laura's performance turned out to be a great disappointment. She forgot her lines and couldn't convey the character's emotions truthfully. The committee listened carefully to her monologue, but their eyes revealed dissatisfaction. The exam results were predictable. Laura did not pass the competitive selection. This came as a real shock to the girl. She was used to getting everything without any effort and did not expect such an outcome. A few hours after the results were announced, Laura's enraged father burst into Senor Gasper's studio. It was clear he was not only upset and crestfallen, but also furious with his daughter's teacher. Senor Gasper didn't get a chance to say anything before Laura's father shouted, "You're incompetent and a fool. My daughter didn't get into the theater academy because of you. And I've been paying you for her lessons." Senor Gasper was stunned. He had never in his life heard such rude insults directed at himself. "I'll make sure you're fired," Laura's father threatened. "And no theater studio in our country will ever hire you again. Remember my words." With that, Laura's father stormed out of the studio. Senor Gasper felt awful and decided to go home. An hour later, the studio director called him and said he was fired. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't do otherwise. Either I fire you, or I lose my job myself." "I'm sorry again, Senor Gasper," he said. The teacher understood that arguing was pointless and accepted everything that happened with great dignity. The next day, he came to the studio, packed his things, and left on his own. Leaving his favorite place, the teacher felt tears in his eyes. Benito looked sadly at Andres Quesada. "How unfair," he muttered with frustration. "Yes, I agree," nodded his companion. "But life often turns out this way. Some things are beyond our control." "Yeah," murmured the boy. Senor Gasper managed to scrape by without a job. He still had students who came to him at home. He understood he needed to find work, but he couldn't see himself as anything other than a teacher of acting. I understand, nodded Benito. Fortunately, I came to visit my grandmother and grandfather who still live here and accidentally met Senor Gasper on the street, explained Andres Quesada with regret. If not for this encounter, I don't know what would have happened to the teacher. I'm so ashamed I didn't call him for so long. With these words, he threw a remorseful glance at Benito. That's why I'm here, the actor added. I want to personally thank all the people who stood by the teacher during this difficult time and helped him as much as they could. Benito just shrugged. It wasn't difficult for me at all. Nevertheless, I ask you to accept this money, said Andres Quesada, handing Benito a plump paper bundle. The boy shook his head. I'm sorry, but I won't take it, Senor Quesada, said Benito. The story you've told me is worth much more than any money. It inspired me to give it another try. With these words, Benito told Andres Quesada about his own childhood dream of becoming an actor and about his failure in the Theater Academy exams. Sorry that I gave up after just one attempt, confessed Benito. Andres Quesada nodded understandingly. We all make mistakes. The key is not to fear them and to correct them in time, he said. Benito felt a surge of joy and inspiration. Yes, you're right, Senor Quesada. I will try again, he exclaimed. The renowned actor gave him a dazzling smile. Then perhaps I can offer you something better than money. What if I speak to the members of the admissions committee at the Theater Academy and put in a good word for you? Andres Quesada's offer was more than tempting, but suddenly Benito felt that he didn't want it. I'm sorry, Senor Quesada, he said quietly. But I want to try to get into the Theater Academy on my own. It's important to me. I want to prove to myself that I can fulfill my dearest dream if I believe in myself and work hard towards it. Andres Quesada didn't immediately believe what he heard. Had Benito really refused his help? After a minute of silence, the famous actor finally found his voice. I won't hide it, you've surprised me, kid. But I respect your decision. If you achieve everything by yourself, you will respect yourself even more. That's commendable. Benito was pleased to hear those words. However, I can't just leave it like that, Andres Quesada added finally. Here's my business card. If you ever need any help from me, don't hesitate to reach out. Also, you can call Senor Gasper and ask him to help you with your admission. I've sorted out his main job. He'll be teaching remotely at the Theater Academy. I'm sure he'll gladly take you on as a student. I'll write his number on the other side of the card now. With these words, the actor took out a rectangular piece of cardboard from his pocket and asked for a pen from Benito. He then scribbled Senor Gasper's number on the card and handed it to the young man. Benito gratefully took it and examined it closely. Against a black background, Andres Quesada's name and phone number were written in gold letters. Benito carefully tucked the business card into the apron pocket. After that, he and Andres Quesada said goodbye like old friends. The very next day, Benito called Senor Gasper and signed up for lessons with him. When he arrived at his teacher's home, he was surprised by the change that had come over him. Senor Gasper wore a new shirt and trousers, and his shoes gleamed with fresh wax. All of this was gifted to me by my student Andres, confessed Senor Gasper, discreetly wiping away a tear. So many years have passed, and he still hasn't forgotten me. Benito looked moved too. But why are we standing in the doorway? Senor Gasper suddenly realized. Young man, come into the living room. Benito nodded and followed his host. He immediately felt a sense of trust towards him. This man will help my dream come true, Benito decided to himself. So, let's get acquainted. Your name is Benito, right? Senor Gasper asked. Yes, sir, the boy nodded. And you dream of becoming an actor? The teacher continued. That's right, Benito replied. Then onwards to your dream. Senor Gasper smiled and began the lesson. There were only a few months left until Benito's entrance exams to the theater academy, but he noticed that his teacher was determined. He never doubted for a moment that the boy would succeed. Lessons with Senor Gaspar were intense and deeply immersed in the art of acting. Every time Benito went to his lessons, he was full of excitement and hope. They worked on breathing exercises, speech techniques, and the basics of stage movement. Senor Gaspar explained to Benito that an actor must be able to control his body and voice in order to convey the emotions and feelings of the character. Each session was a real discovery for Benito. Gaspar demanded full commitment, concentration, perseverance, and self-belief from him. They rehearsed scenes from classical plays, analyzed characters and their motivations. Senor Gaspar taught Benito to find true emotions within himself and express them on stage. One of the most memorable lessons was working on a classic tragedy by Racine. Senor Gaspar gave Benito the task of choosing a monologue and preparing it for the next lesson. For hours, the boy rehearsed the excerpt in front of the mirror in the parlor, trying to faithfully convey every intonation and gesture of the character. Benito even practiced by reading the monologue to clients, who were amazed by his skill. When the lesson with Senor Gaspar began, Benito felt nervous but was ready to show everything he had learned. He stepped into the center of the room and began his monologue. With each word, he immersed himself more deeply into the chosen character, conveying all its tragic aspects, doubts, and torment. Senor Gaspar watched attentively as his student performed, and when the young man finished the monologue, he said, "You did great, Benito. I see tremendous progress that you've achieved in just a few months. However, remember this, the talent of an actor is not just technique, but also sincerity. You must believe in what you say on stage." The teacher's words became a real revelation for Benito, and he tried to remember them for life. Finally, the time came to travel to the capital for the entrance exams. Benito was very nervous, but thanks to Senor Gaspar's lessons, he felt more prepared for the challenge than ever before. When the young man stepped onto the stage in front of the admissions committee, his heart beat faster than usual, but he suddenly realized it was a pleasant excitement. Benito believed in himself and knew he had done everything possible to prepare. His performance was filled with emotions, every word sounded clear and confident. The committee watched attentively as he played, and when Benito finished his monologue, the teachers applauded. A few days later, the young man received the exam results. He was accepted into the theater academy. Benito was ecstatic and immediately called his favorite teacher to share the joyful news. Thus, thanks to his kindness, fortunate circumstances, support, and his own perseverance, Benito's dream suddenly became a reality. He moved to the capital and immersed himself in his studies. Remembering Andres Quesada's words, he made an effort to find time to call his teacher and always visited him when he came to see his family. Benito graduated from the theater academy with honors and was given the lead role in a youth production. Amazingly, during rehearsals, he met Andres Quesada again, who had come as a director by a fortunate coincidence. The renowned actor recognized Benito immediately and invited him for a stroll after rehearsal and a cup of coffee. The young man happily agreed. During the walk, Andres mentioned that he was looking for a young talented actor for a supporting role in his upcoming production, which he planned to direct. Benito couldn't believe his luck and immediately accepted. Thus began his career, promising to ignite a new acting talent in the theatrical and cinematic sky. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.